afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this APM Midlands branch webinar. I'm Ellie Breakwell, the APM branch's coordinator, and I'll be your host for today. Please be aware this webinar is being recorded and you are in listen-only mode. There will be some interactive elements to today's webinar, so please have your phone or another web browser open ready and go to menti.com and use the code 38826982. This will also be displayed on the screen with each question. Today we are joined by Fábio Morais. If you have any questions for Fábio, you can submit these via your control panel, and time permitting, I'll read those out to Fábio at the end of his presentation. Today's webinar can count towards your CPD, and there is more information about how to review and reflect on this in this session on the handout attached. Thank you for joining us today, and without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to you, Fábio.
Thank you, Ali. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar on cybersecurity. Today, we aim to provide you with a wide understanding of cybercrime and how to reduce the risk profile of your business. We hope that by lifting the veil of the people behind hacking and reveal their motivations, you can better understand the risks and what type of malicious actors is likely to target your business and in which way. So my name is Fábio Morais. I'm a director at Kazuka Group, and I've been in the IT industry for about 20 years. Having started as a software engineer, I've worked with different sectors, airspace, energy, mining, just to name a few. Cybersecurity has always been a topic of interest to me, and as a result, I'm also a certified penetration tester, which obviously has enabled me to better support businesses reducing their cyber risk. The agenda for today is to offer a better understanding of the scale of the problem, financial and reputational consequences of cyber incidents, and also obviously how to mitigate that risk. So let's dive right in. First and foremost, it's quite important to understand the categories in which hackers have been put on. And I suppose this, some of you looking at the screen can relate to a Western film where the good guy wears the white hat, the bad guy wears the black hat, and someone wearing a grey hat probably sits somewhere in the middle. So this is where the categories came from initially. And to give you an overview, obviously, the black hat is someone that attempts to break into networks for malicious purposes. It could be related to organized cybercrime or even funded by the state. White hat is someone that works in cybersecurity. Obviously, there will be commission by businesses to or legal authorities to simulate genuine attacks. And obviously provide recommendations and also remediation practices for any security faults that they may find. Grey hat, as I mentioned before, and as the name suggests, is someone that actually sits somewhere in the middle. It can be a former black hat hacker that is now working with these legal authorities, with law enforcement. It could be someone that actually has expertise that allow him to do a bit of both white hacking, but also some malicious activities in the background as well. So it's someone that actually sits somewhere in the middle. So let's have a quick look at the actual cyber threats and also a little bit more about the type of actors that we have within this space. So to begin with, we'll start with the thrill seekers. These are often teenagers that actually rely on existing strategies that they can find on social media, YouTube, and so on, and widely available on the internet. And they do it for the purpose of getting attention, and especially within that social media ecosystem. We also have hacktivists. Basically, they are motivated. They are ideology driven. They have usually really good technical knowledge, and they target usually networks and primarily using DDoS type of attacks. That doesn't mean that they won't be using other techniques, but DDoS seems to be the main one. The reason being is because they usually target specific websites, and they want to bring those services down. Obviously, on the right hand side, further on, we have criminal activities. So organized crime that obviously will use all sorts of techniques to be able to achieve their means, and their motivation is purely financial. Phishing and ransomware are some of their preferred methods. Again, doesn't mean that they will be using other techniques. Another type of actor are people that work within businesses, so unhappy employees, for example, that may steal proprietary information. They usually rely on the existing knowledge of the organization, the security systems within, to be able to get access to that information, and obviously with the sole purpose of jeopardizing the operations of that business, or as a revenge motivated actions. Further along on espionage, there's two areas here. There's the state or privately funded individuals that obviously have they're very capable, and they will create their own specific exploits with the intent of stealing that specific data and attack specific businesses, sectors, industries, and so on. So these are highly capable individuals and highly funded as well. Last but not least on this list, we have terrorism, obviously ideology-driven. Mainly they seek to sabotage critical infrastructure. That's usually obviously their main goal, and there are some examples of attacks for example, in Canada, where hackers were able to bring down the traffic light system to create chaos, for example. And this was just a test exercise from their point of view. One other one that is not particularly on this list, but you will be aware with things that are happening in the world at the moment, are organizations or agencies that work for governments, and they are funded by governments to obviously attack other countries as well. So that will primarily focus on military infrastructure, but also other areas that they can obviously bring down and infiltrate. It's not on this list because it's not something that we usually have to worry so much about it in comparison with these actors, but obviously because of recent events in the world, I decided to bring it up as well. So let's look at a few case studies of black hat hackers, just to give you a bit more understanding of real life examples of deeds that happen. We'll start with Edwin, that at 16 years old hacked into a telecom in the Netherlands, and he got control over the national emergency hotline, created quite a bit of chaos in the Netherlands, and cost the company, that telecom company, around 3 million euros. Tragically, he was found dead at the age of 22. So this is second example would be Hector. In 2011, helped the Tunisian protesters to bring down the country's internet. So he brought down the whole internet in Tunisia. There was no internet at all. He's now currently a FBI informant. So on the first example with Edwin, he was very much motivated by, he was a thrill seeker, and he was motivated by getting attention online. He had a lot of followers online, and eventually one of them turned on him and obviously got law enforcement involved, and that's how Edwin was caught. And then he had to run from the country that he lived in travel around Europe, ended up in South Korea, where he sadly was found dead. Hector now obviously works for the FBI, still very much in the US, working with the FBI. So Hector was obviously a hacktivist, and is now made this transition from a pure black hat to a grey hat, you can say. Another case study we have here is about Albert Gonzalez. His motivations are purely financial, so it sits on that criminal act type of act in that category. He hacked into a major retailer in the US, and he obviously stole a considerable amount of money, 600 million USD in credit card information. He's currently serving a 20-year sentence, and he's supposed to be released in 2025. So something to look forward for sure. So moving on from this, just to give you an understanding of the 5 stages of hacking, and that all attacks go through these phases. So we have recon, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, and clearing the tracks. I will focus primarily here on this particular one, is the recon, because this is where most of the time is spent by hackers during the full process, because recon obviously gives a lot of information. This is where there's a lot of social media probing, for example, and this is where social engineering comes into place, and things like pictures that are posted online that can reveal dates. By dates, I mean date of birth, security access card informations, and any other sort of information that might be useful for someone to get more further knowledge about a business or about an individual, and to then use those techniques, for example, like social engineering, to be able to gain access to information that they should not have. So recon is the main phase of the process, and also the one that where social media is more targeted on. Scanning, obviously, there's lots of tools out there that can be used for scanning IP addresses, for scanning data packages, and other sorts of information. So that's obviously a very important phase as well. Once those 2 phases are complete, the attack itself takes place, and where a hacker will try to gain access to the target machine, and from there, once on the network, will try to escalate its privileges within that network, and work his all the way up and get as much access as it can. For example, if we revert back to the example of Edwin, he got access to a machine on the telecom network, and he worked his way up all the way to the router, which was the core of the network, and once he was there, he could do pretty much everything and control all the machines within that network. So that was obviously a very successful attack. Maintaining that access is primarily focusing on backdoors. So once you gain access, one of the first things hackers do is to implement a backdoor so that they can access that machine at any given point without having to go through the process again, because obviously it is not only time consuming, but it draws attention. So having that backdoor there is quite important to be able to access that machine without further investment of time, because a lot of hacking is primarily investing time into getting access. And last but definitely not least, clearing the tracks. Obviously, once access is gained and can be maintained at any given point with backdoors, it's clearing all the tracks of a potential breach, so that no one knows that they have been breached, and obviously regaining access can be done fairly easily. So I think at this point, Ellie, we can have the first poll, if that's okay. Okay, so on this first poll, obviously we're asking about phishing. What do you do when you receive a URL link on email? So it would be quite interesting to see the results coming through. Right, so that is very good so far. So the vast majority inspects the URL link before they open it. That is extremely good. And obviously, you'll see in the next slides, but phishing is probably the most common form of cyber breaches. We'll see in the following slides, but it's quite a problem at the moment. Okay, so very good. 78% saying that they do inspect the URL links before they open them, and the other saying that flag the URL to IT or contact the sender to ask them to verify the authenticity. So all of them are extremely good, and I'm quite happy to see that. So if Ali, we can carry on with the presentation. Okay, so that was good. That was really good results. I'm really pleased to see that. So moving on from that, the most common types of breaches, there are probably a lot more than I could put on the presentation, but these are obviously the most common ones. Ransomware is obviously when malicious software takes hold of your system, and obviously makes it unusable unless there's some form of payment being made to unencrypt either a machine or a disk or access or even a network to some extent. DDoS, we mentioned DDoS before. The main objective is to overload the computer services in order to bring them down and make that service pretty much redundant. We saw an example of what Hector did to the Tunisian infrastructure, where they brought the whole internet down, so there was no internet in the country. That was used. DDoS was used for that particular attack. It was a huge, obviously, DDoS attack. Brute force attack. There's different forms here, but the main ones are the common one, which is basically using CPU power to try to discover passwords and try to break them. Obviously, there's huge lists of passwords out there that common passwords that can be used to carry out these attacks. Other form of brute force is what's called dictionary attacks. This will use, again, vast lists of words, phrases, dates, and this is where, obviously, if you go back to what I was saying before, on the recon phase, anything that is, for example, a date of birth will be put on the list to try to find out the passwords that can be met. So that's another form of attack. Download attacks are when someone installs something or downloads something from the internet and installs malicious software. That could be a virus, a Trojan, or any other sort of malicious software on the machine, and from there there's a backdoor that is automatically created, and the hackers can have access to that particular machine through that backdoor. Phishing. There's multiple variations of phishing nowadays. There's spear phishing, whaling, and others coming because cybersecurity moves at such a fast pace that all these new forms are coming through. But obviously, the common one is a mass email, untargeted mass email sent to people asking for sensitive information. That could be in a form of, trying to mimic an email from the bank, from an employee, from social media, and so on. Spear phishing is a little bit more targeted than normal phishing. So there will be emails sent across to a specific group. It could be, the categories could be age, could be a job title, could be something else. So it's very much a targeted form of phishing. And whaling is fairly recent, is targeted to C-level individuals. So straight to the CTOs, CEOs, and so on of businesses to try to get access through the top. So that's why it's called whaling. So social engineering, we mentioned this before as well, is manipulating people into carrying out specific actions. So it can be someone with that has access to some particular data and shares information with a friend or with someone that they've met online, and that person asks for further information that should not have access, and they use these sort of social engineering techniques to get further and further information that ultimately will allow them to exploit more successfully. This can also be take the form of targeted social media scanning, as I mentioned before, to collect information regarding businesses or even individuals. One form of attack that is also fairly new is the water holing attack. Basically, is setting up fake websites that are really well crafted to look like the real deal, and people will and users will go on that particular website and they will input information there that will be then captured and used to them against themselves. So that could take the form of, for example, a bank, an online banking website or a banking website, where the people would be asked to enter again things like date of birth, address, and things like that, so that they could then use that information to obviously gain access to areas that they shouldn't be getting access. So, sources of data breaches. 45% of all breaches are still related to direct hacking. So, individuals going through the process of scanning networks and trying to find security flaws within those networks, and then gain access to machines and those networks in particular. So that's still the main form of data breaches. But you'll see that human error and social engineering represent a big part as well. Not so much with malware or physical type of attacks. Physical type of attacks are, for example, a compromised USB drive that is then passed on to the victim, and that will insert that on a laptop or a computer, and then will be hacked using that sort of technique. That's not so much the case these days. Malware obviously is downloaded usually from the internet, and social engineering, we mentioned social media plays a big part here. Human error could be things like poor configuration of systems, could be things like, for example, updates on those particular systems that are pending, but there's a decision not to implement them straight away, and that could lead, for example, to a breach. So that's the sort of things that happen within the human error, and how it is split here on these type of data breaches. So I think now we could have, Ellie, if you don't mind, the second point. Okay, so when creating a new user account, so quite a few of the attendees say they create a new and randomly generated password and enable 2FA, which is fantastic. And obviously, that is definitely the preferred option, is to create a new and randomly generated password and use two-factor authentication. It is now well documented that using 2FA will reduce at least 80% reduce the risk for about 80%. So using 2FA is extremely important. And obviously using randomly generated passwords are really important. Using password managers is extremely important. So some people obviously saying that they create passwords using combinations of letters and numbers that are identifiable with you. So that's obviously a big no-no, because as I explained before, using social engineering techniques, you can get access to this information, and that's definitely a big no-no. So from all these answers, I suppose the answer D, create new and randomly generated passwords, is definitely the one to go. And B, create a new password every time by adding a unique identifier. It's an okay technique to use, but I wouldn't rely too much on it, because obviously there is a common denominator, which in this particular example we said that would be James 1. So James 1 is always the common denominator there, and that, as long as you have 50% of that information, it reduces the amount of time required to then crack the password. So if you can, Ellie, go back to the presentation. So In here, obviously, this data is from 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And since then, obviously, new computer processors have been released. So the amount of time required to reduce, the amount of time required to crack passwords has been massively reduced. 12 characters are still acceptable, but 16 is now becoming the new minimum amount of characters required to be considered as a strong password. And as looking at this table, you'll see that, for example, using a character password with one uppercase and one number, that only takes 1 hour to crack. So that's extremely easy to crack. You'll see obviously at the bottom, if you go for 12 characters and you're using a one uppercase letter, one number, one symbol, that dramatically increases the amount of time required and the processing capability required to crack a password. So we're saying there that 34,000 years, that's what would be required. But again, this data goes back to 2018, and since then, new processing capabilities have been released. So it's even 12 character passwords with one uppercase letter and numbering symbols no longer considered secure, where 16 is now the minimum amount of characters recommended, and obviously combining numbers, uppercase letters, and symbols. So we'll look at some major cyber incidents, and obviously you'll see the UK Prime Minister there. Some of you may remember that there was this party conference whereby they were trialing a new app to register for this conference, and Dawn Foster, the first thing that she did when she downloaded the app was try to log in as Boris Johnson, and she successfully logged in as Boris Johnson and got access to all the information. She actually went further ahead and she posted on social media, which made it a bit worse. But there you go, some information about Boris Johnson straight away. So in this particular case, the actor was an inside actor. Her motivation was obviously not malicious. She was just surprised that she was able to log in as Boris Johnson. But there you go. This was obviously a major incident as well that happened at that particular party conference. All the case studies, going straight to social media, Facebook exposed over 400 million phone numbers on a server that had no password protection. So that was a huge oversight from their point of view. They were unrightly so fined £500,000 by the UK ICO. Also, that this was then related to the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So again, big data breach there. So another example, this is in the US, in Las Vegas, the MGM resort that was hacked, and personal details of 10 million guests were compromised. So a lot of personal identifiable information was stolen there. A travel firm, Teletext Holidays, I'm not sure if they're in business still, they were exposed, and 500,000 customer files, again containing personal identifiable information, were being kept on a unsecure server. They got easily hacked, and all of those were exposed on the dark web. Security company Suprema had 1 million biometric and personal identifiable information hacked in 2019. So that's huge because biometrics obviously are quite important from a security point of view, used on borders to enter countries, but also now nowadays being used to unlock your phones, unlock your laptops. So that sort of data being exposed is a huge problem, as you would imagine. Last but not least, in this particular case study, British Airways back in 2018 had card payment details from nearly 400,000 customers stolen. Again, we'll see a bit further ahead how much that is worth on the black market. But again, a huge data breach and a huge cyber incident that took place. So where all of these data end up, all of this data ends up in the dark web, but what exactly is the dark web and how big it is and what exactly it contains. So the web itself is composed by 3 areas. One is the clear web or the surface web, which consists of about 4%. And that's the web that we all access when we open our browsers. We go Google and we search for whatever we want to search, and that is pretty much your clear web and clean web. Really only consists of 4% of the entire internet. The deep web represents 90%. Mainly, it contains records, legal, medical, academic, and so on. It contains databases with lots of information, obviously, intranet, and things like subscription-only information, your Netflix, your Disney Plus, and so on. So that's what the deep web consists of. The dark web, it's only 6%, and obviously, as you would imagine, it will contain criminal activities. But also, there's some sort of there's elements of whistleblowing, human rights activism going on there, and it's not all criminal, it's not all bad, but obviously mainly consists of criminal activities. And obviously, it's a very dangerous place indeed. So, once you hacked, how much is your data worth? Just to be able to give you a bit of a flavor. Profile accounts, so these could be your LinkedIn accounts or Facebook accounts, any sort of profile accounts that you may have. That's your box standards on the dark web. They usually sell for around $1 per profile. That's pretty much box standard. Your credit card details, and we've seen some examples of hackers, how much credit card information they've stolen. It typically ranges from $5 to $30 per account, and obviously depends on how much information is actually passed on. And specifically with credit card details, it depends on how much credit is on those credit cards as well. So it all varies. Your personal identifiable information usually sells for about $300 per record on the dark web, and probably one of the most sought after information currently on the dark web is your personal health information, which sells for about $350 per record. So, Ellie, I think we can run another poll, if that's okay. Okay, some results coming through now. So if during the Microsoft Teams or Zoom meeting, someone sends you a file through the chat, what did you do? So some results coming through now. Vast majority answering that they will ask who sent it and what was it for, which is very good. %, saying that they run an antivirus scan on that particular file. And so far, no one turns a VPN on or no one downloads it, installs it, and uses it straight away. So that is actually really good. So there's been quite recently, there's been an increase of attacks using Microsoft Teams specifically, where once the hackers get access to your profile account, they will log in as yourself or crack into your Microsoft Teams account, and they will participate in meetings, and they will obviously post on the chat or send something on the chat, which will be a malicious file for you to download and install, and from there they will gain obviously access to a backdoor straight away to that particular machine. If that machine is then connected to a network, they will work their way through again with escalating privileges and get access to more important machines within that network. So the main thing here, if someone sends a file during a meeting on the online chat, it's not being solicited by anyone, you don't know what it is absolutely paramount that you ask who sent who sent it and what is it for, and if the answer is still not very clear, or if in doubt, report it. Obviously, run an antivirus can be done as well, just on that particular file, just to do a triage, but then obviously report it to the IT team to have a further look into it, because do not install, never install anything that you're not 100% sure you know what it is, and you have solicited that particular file as well. So really good, really happy with the answers here so far. So Ellie, can we go back to the presentation? Okay, so we've seen how much the data is worth, and roughly how much is being sold for on the dark web. But now going into more detail about the dark web itself, what does it look like? I took the liberty of actually going on the dark web and take some screenshots so that I can demonstrate here today. In this particular example, we see a UK passport being sold for £850. And also with a plus, if you want a new bank account, an additional £700. So this is some of the things that happened in the dark web. Again, similar example, but this is for becoming a citizen of the US. So you get the full shebang here. You get a passport, social security number, driving license, birth certificate, and you name it, and all costs you $1,500. So not too expensive if you want a new identity, but this is the sort of things that you can see and you can find on the dark web. Also, a hacker for hire. Quite easy to get one of these on the dark web. As you can see there, some examples: hacking into Facebook and Twitter accounts, get remote control of someone's phone, which is quite scary, as most of you will agree with me. Also, DDoS, for example, if someone wants to bring a particular website down, $900, that's the cost. For example, hacking into someone's phone, $700. Credit cards, we spoke of credit cards before, and the different prices and costs of credit cards. But for example, here you see an example. A bundle of 50 credit cards can cost you anything between $1,000 and $5,000 US. Obviously, they will all have credit, apparently, and they're all high quality according to this website on the dark web. And obviously, you get the whole information. You've got the CVV code as well. You've got the first name, last name, address, and so on. So all the information will be sent with credit cards. Right, so the cost of cybercrime. So obviously, all of this, as you've seen, all of these activities on the dark web, they'll amount to a huge figure. In this particular case, according to data from 2020, equates to $3 trillion globally, which would obviously qualify as the world's 5th largest economy. So it would be larger than the UK, for example. On average, cybercrime is growing 15%, and more alarmingly than that, 40% of businesses that are hacked stop trading. So that's the end of the show for businesses that get hacked. These statistics, obviously, as scary as they are, 92% of all cybercrime is actually not reported. So businesses and individuals, particularly, do not report when they get hacked. So these are figures of things that have been reported, but we believe, obviously, that the figures are much higher. Another figure that is quite alarming is that on average only 5% of corporate data is properly protected. So obviously businesses will have firewalls, will have password policies and all these things. But once someone gets access to that network, they get access to all the files, because only 5% of companies actually encrypt those files within the network. So They focus a lot on the protecting the network, but they do not do the due diligence when it comes to the data that is actually behind that network or behind those firewalls within the network. The data is not encrypted. So once you get into the network, it's easy to get access to everything because it's just not properly protected. Most cybersecurity professionals will agree, and I definitely agree, that more manpower and support is definitely required because cyber criminals are really well funded. They do this for a living, and they do not sleep pretty much. And there's a lot of automation going on in cybercrime. So there's a lot of bot type of attacks. So these are all automated attacks. They can even hack into networks and into businesses without much effort, without having to actually spend time in front of the screens. And security professionals cannot afford to do that. They have to be in front of the screen all the time. You'll have heard of Internet of Things. This has increased massively. Is estimated to have increased 500% between 2016 and 2017. So these are your Alexas, your Wi-Fi webcams, your smart TVs, and so on. So everything that is IoT, attacks have increased on those because they're poorly protected. Usually they are within the same networks as other more important machines. And once you get access to the network through, for example, a Wi-Fi cam, not only you can see what's going on within the premises, but you can then access other more important and paramount machines within that particular network. So attacks on IoT have increased massively. This data is from 2016 to 2017, but we expect it to be much higher. So finally, we're seeing what the actors, who are the actors, what their motivations are, what techniques did they use, how the dark web looks like, and so how much is costing to businesses and individuals. So what can we do specifically to protect ourselves, or in this particular case, reducing the cyber risk within projects. So fundamentally, it requires a cultural change because this type of risk needs to be perceived in a different way and ultimately managed in a different way. And the change, it needs to be driven from the top. And obviously, in this particular instance, you as project managers have that sort of capability as well and responsibility to help driving the cultural change that is required to tackle cybercrime and reduce the cyber risk. So within the context of projects, reducing the cyber risk, some of the tools and techniques that we can use definitely communicate the expectations and responsibilities around this particular problem to our stakeholders and suppliers. And obviously, if possible, these should be legally binding. We're talking here specifically on suppliers, and going through, or mentioning as well my second point, using suppliers that are actually certified. You know, they have things in place like ISO 27001 or Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, and making sure that they actually do their bit in terms of protecting you as well, or in your project as well, and communicate that those expectations and those responsibilities from the outset. That is definitely quite paramount, because in the case of an incident, it's quite important for everyone to know what do they need to do and who's responsible for that particular scenario. So that is definitely a technique that should be used and should be implemented in the project. Include cyber risk when you do the project risk management, risk assessment. Sorry, include cyber risk in that assessment and define a lab, because cyber risk you'll never be able to reduce it to 0%. So that's impossible. And anything can be hacked, provided that you have enough money and you allocate enough time. Anything can be hacked. But obviously, what we can do is mitigate that risk, reduce that risk as much as we can. So when we do the the risk assessments, including that cyber risk in the project, and define what is as low as reasonably practicable. That is quite paramount to make sure that we do everything that we can to bring that risk down. Also, having a zero trust based data access policy that goes across the projects. That could, for example, be encrypting sensitive files and folders, USB drives, and so on, and only give access to those that particular data to people that actually really need it and for as long as they need it. And if they no longer require access to that data, remove those privileges as soon as you can, because you don't know when the person that have access to a particular folder that, within a network or within in the cloud that's been shared for that particular project. They've left the business, you are not aware, they were not very happy, they're happy to share that information with someone else, and this is where issues occur. So implement that zero trust based data access policy is extremely important. All the data within that project is to be on a need to know basis. Obviously, applying all software updates as soon as they become available. This is really, really important. The vast majority, and you've seen the pie chart before, of those 45% that are pure hacking data breaches that come originate from pure hacking, of those 45%, more than half occur because the software updates haven't been, or machines have not been updated or patched up on time. So updates were available, but they were pushed back because they were not seen as a priority, and then new attacks, new exploits came out, and they got breached using those sort of techniques. And if you go back to the example of Edwin, we got access to that telecom in the Netherlands. It was because that telecom postponed updates to their systems time and again because it was not seen as a huge priority. So again, updating all the software, that is extremely paramount. Using VPNs when working remotely and including from home. The reason behind that is because obviously, even when you work, well, obviously when you're working remotely, if you are out and about, or hotels, cafes, and so on, you access a network that you have no control. You do not know how it's being configured, and once you are within that network, you become visible to everyone within that network, and quite easily someone sat next to you could be hacking into your laptop without you knowing, because they can see you, they can see your laptop on that network, sat on Costa or Starbucks. They can see your computer on that, or mobile phone on that network, and they'll start scanning your packages to see what you're doing, what you're browsing. This is where the VPN obviously comes into play, because it encrypts the communication and prevents them to scan what you're doing. If they actually get access to that sort of information, they can crack into your laptop quite easily. So never trust remote networks, hotels, again, cafes, and so on. Also including from home, because a lot of people, sadly, when they get the routers at home, they don't change the passwords, they don't change the standard name, the standard passwords, and all of this information, the standard passwords, are well known, and there are databases with that information. So, for example, if I'm a BT engineer and I'm responsible to come and help a customer implement their install a network at home and set up their router, and if I leave BT and I'm unhappy, I can take all that data, all of that, those passwords, the standard passwords for all the models of those routers, and I can take it and I can pretty much, if you haven't changed the password, I can hack into all the houses that are using those sort of routers. So this is just an example. Even if you're at home, use your VPN, because that does encrypt your data and it does add another layer of protection. Well, obviously, running antivirus scans, that's obviously something that everyone should do, at least on a weekly basis. And last but not least, another big, probably the biggest one to reduce the cyber risk in projects is to enforce a multi-factor authentication. So having that 2FA enabled, that is extremely important because it reduces by at least 80% the chances of you being hacked. Because even if your username and password get compromised, it's still very hard to get access to the systems if 2FA is enabled. So that becomes a lot harder. Not impossible, because a lot of people use 2FA via SMS, and SMS can also be cracked. And this again goes back to the example I was giving you when you're working remotely. If you have multiple devices on a network, hacking that cell phone, mobile phone, or tablet is not hard. And then if you're using two-factor authentication by SMS, you can also intercept that message and you get full access to everything. So two-factor authentication is not bulletproof, but it dramatically reduces the risk of you being hacked. So it is extremely important. And obviously, using strong passwords, 8 characters obviously not safe, 12 or more need to be used, and they need to be unique and without personal details. And I give you an example here that it is something that is very random, but I suppose fairly easy to memorize. And it equates to a really good password. It's long, has characters, has numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and it's not. There's no personal details in there, so it makes it a really strong, solid password. So using strong passwords, it is of extreme importance. And I believe Ellie has a final poll to run that we can potentially run now. So again, after connecting to public Wi-Fi, what should we do? And obviously, turning on the VPN is definitely the right way to go here, and make sure that we are entirely protected. And yet, the results coming through, and it seems like everyone pretty much is aware of it and does it, which is great, which is really good. Okay, Ellie, we can go back and we can have some questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Fabio. That was really, really useful and very informative. I'm sure it's given us a lot of lots of food for thought on how secure all our accounts are. We've had a few questions come through and also some really nice comments from everybody. Just letting you know that it was a really good and useful webinar. So thank you very much. So the first question is from Ashok, and he says, would you say the only safe space is not connected to the internet?
Yes, I suppose so. I suppose that is definitely the case. There's no safe space nowadays, and like I said before, anything can be hacked. As long as you provide that you have enough money and enough time and you invest that, anything can be hacked. It is definitely in hacking. It's a matter of time, really, and how much effort you're going to put into getting into that system, because you try different techniques to get there, and obviously using different types of not just techniques but tools that are out there already and are quite automated. It becomes just a matter of time. So yes, definitely the only safe space is when you're not connected, because if you're connected, there's always a risk. The risk is always there.
Great, thank you. And we have one question that's come in from Rob. Is there a national cyber security centre, and does this only cover the UK, or do we help other countries?
Yes, there's definitely a national cybersecurity centre, and we do a lot of work to help other countries as well. So particularly at the moment, there's a lot of help being provided to Ukraine to prevent or to mitigate potential cyber attacks coming from in this particular case from Russia. So it's not just national; it is international. You can go on their website. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of good recommendations out there as well to support businesses. One of the things that the National Cybersecurity Centre is advising at the moment is for businesses to take action when it comes to cybersecurity, because the risk has increased since the war has started in Ukraine. And obviously, the UK is not directly involved in the conflict at the moment, but as you will be well aware, there's a lot of sanctions being imposed by the UK to Russia, And cybercrime is the perfect form of retaliation, and we've already seen some forms of retaliation coming through, but more will come, because obviously the focus now is on the field now. It's in Ukraine, but further attacks will come to the countries imposing sanctions. So there is a national cybersecurity centre. There's a lot of good information out there. We do support other countries when we can, and you should visit their website.
Great, thank you. And another question has come in from Ashok, and he asks, with bank branches being closed and we're doing more and more banking via our phones, will this increase fraud? And do you, sorry, I'm just reading, are phone services secure in your opinion? How secure do you think it can be spooked and overcome?
That's a really good question, and exactly, that is absolutely correct. So online banking has increased a lot, and the banks are well aware of the risk, and that's why the mobile applications on your phone are potentially more secure than you do your online banking using the browser, because the mobile applications are really well encrypted, and the communication is well encrypted. Some of the banks now offer two-factor authentication as well, before you are able to access your accounts. And also, one of the good things or the best practices to implement is to have alerts every time there's movements on your account. So either debits or credits, you have a pop-up saying there's been some movement, so that you can track that. If 2FA is available for you, which it should be on most banking apps, enable that 2FA, and also and that 2FA is usually in the form of an SMS to you that the bank sends, and that is, although SMS can be intercepted by man-in-the-middle attacks, it makes it a lot more secure. And also, you never share those codes with staff from the bank. You will say that on your text message, but sometimes if you get a phone call and someone asks you for the code, you might believe that, and you might share that code. Never share those codes with staff or anyone that asks for those codes. The apps are fairly secure, so I wouldn't be overly concerned with the app. And also, obviously, if you have those alerts coming through and you have the 2FA enabled, it should be okay. Another thing that you obviously can do, in addition to use your mobile app to do online banking, is before you actually go into your app, you turn, if you have a VPN on your phone or your mobile device using, turn that VPN, because that's an additional layer of encryption that you're adding to the data going in transit. So the data goes from your phone, transits from your phone to the server of the bank. So obviously it's already encrypted by the bank, but if you add an additional layer, it becomes even more difficult to intercept that communication. So that's another technique that can be used, apart from the 2FA and obviously the notifications.
Great, thank you. That is very good advice. And we'll just have one final question from Mike. He asks, what are your thoughts on companies moving all of their data to cloud-based services such as AWS Cloud? How secure do you see these services being?
Very good question. The cloud will be, in theory, more secure, because the big providers, public cloud providers like Amazon, AWS, Google, and Microsoft Azure, they make a huge effort to protect the cloud platforms. So there is this outer layer of protection already there to be used. However, moving to the cloud requires a really good set of expertise. And just because your applications are cloud-based, that doesn't mean you cannot be hacked. Quite the opposite. That outer layer, like I said, it is really good, and these three companies put a lot of money and a lot of effort into making them more secure. And every time that there are zero-day type of attacks, they are the first ones to patch up and make sure that everything is a bit more secure. But the inner layer, it's down to the companies, the businesses, to configure, and obviously those providers can support in that configuration, but ultimately their it's a customer responsibility to configure, and the concern comes from that configuration, from that inner layer in the network that requires some set of expertise to configure. So moving to the cloud, it is a good idea, like I said, adds an extra layer of protection, but do not stop at compliance, and do not stop just because the outer layer is fairly secure. There's a lot of work to be done and configured for that inner layer.
Great, thank you so much, Fabio. We've just had lots of comments come in just saying thank you, and it's a great presentation. We've also had one from Kevin just saying thanks, very good, and worrying. So I'm sure there's lots for people to go away and have a think about as well following this. Well, we'll wrap it up there as we have just gone past 1:30. So I'd like to thank you all again for joining us today, and thank you again to you, Fabio, for giving this great presentation and sharing your very valuable knowledge. As I've posted through the chat throughout this presentation, we would be grateful for your feedback via the survey in the link provided. And I'd also like to remind you all that 8pm branches have now begun face-to-face events. So please look out for the next upcoming event in your area, and we really hope to see you there. So thank you again, everybody. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.